We never know how many people are coming on. We have a database of 700. And so a lot of people listen after. A lot of people listen after. And
to be fair, I'm usually one of those people.
Yeah.
I enjoy that.
Yes. Catch it when you can.
Yeah.
So this series is called Courageous Growth. It's a free webinar series here at SoulSalt. And there are a couple of things I need to say to the audience so you understand why we're doing it. Number one, the topics are usually dictated by things in my circle and my field. And one of the reasons why I have confidence that that works for my people is that, and I even had a client this morning, my first client of the morning, said to me, Lynn, I'm always watching what you're doing. I'm always interested in the people you're talking to. You know, you're doing this productive aging thing and you make things look possible because of that. And so that is who usually gets invited. People in my circle who come into the inner circle for a short time, which is what happened with Katie and Kacie. We have a mutual friend out of New York, and Goldie. And Goldie connected us one time when Kacie and Katie were coming into Salt Lake and Utah in general for the Sundance Film Festival, which is a big darn deal. And they've spoken at that festival. That's a big darn deal. And so that's how I got to meet them. We met at the Rose Establishment, Asia. You'll know where that is. We met up for tea and had tea and talked. So that's usually the topics. Now, one of the reasons why we do those here at SoulSalt is at the end of 2023, I really felt like, and I was needing to walk my talk. So I was living one of my book chapters, which is Create Your Own Success Metrics, and seeing all the things, the divisiveness, the lack of harmony, seeing so many things where advocacy and action needed to be. I recognized that I didn't want to measure my success in 2024 by dollar signs. I wanted to measure it by heartbeats. And so we are bringing guests on who talk to the heartbeats. And that's exactly where Katie and Kacie are. So I'm going to introduce them first. After I introduce them, I'm going to talk a little bit about what our agenda is so you guys know where we're going. Then I'll say a couple other things, and then I'm going to turn some big time over to Katie and Kacie. So here's what you need to know about this dynamic duo is they are best friends and they are business partners, and they've been doing this kind of best friend business partners since 2021. They co-founded It All Media, which is short for a bigger name that if they want to mention, they can. And it's really focused on the impact of storytelling. And storytelling, we know through social sciences, is that element that speaks to all of us through our hearts and our minds, and we remember things through story. So these guys have served as executive producers and patrons for Storyteller and research projects. And all of these projects span from things like podcasts, a film, TV events, and brand partnerships. And their work is taking them to speak not only at Sundance, but South by Southwest and other international forums. So we're really excited to have these folks here. I'll just tell you a little bit. Kacie was an SVP of Strategy and co-founded and scaled a 1 million innovation practice. And Katie has spent over a decade leading marketing, comms, fundraising, strategy, nonprofits, NGOs in the US, Europe, and Asia. So together, they bring about 30 years of experience. So I wanted you to know a little bit about them. They're inseparable since they got their master's degree in interactive media at Elon University. So if you have questions specifically about their background, you can look further in some of the media we put out, or you can ask questions of them. Now, this is where we're going to go. A lot of us are interested in the storytelling, or we're interested in organizing and being active, especially activists today. And a lot of us, and I see two of you that I know really well. Denise, I don't know you as well. Two of you on the call right now that are creatives and entrepreneurs at the same time. And we need to share our stories. We need to share them as we discuss. That's how people understand what we do. So we're going to go through 4 topics. 1, how entrepreneurship can be a radical act of activism, using our gifts, our voice to create a world that we want to live in. And a lot of us are entrepreneurs because we want that. Would you guys agree with that? Yeah. Second, the role of story or storytelling in that journey. Third, how our current systems can and do create limiting beliefs and structures, and that is a thing that happens, and some of you are more aware of that than others. And 4, finally, how so Denise, Asia, Rosario, how your authentic voice can not only affect change, but also spark hope. So that's where we're going to go. I think the next thing I want to ask you guys, Katie and Kacie, and I made a long list, thanks, Asia, is you guys are on a mission. So what do you guys actually do? Let's take a minute and just share with them. I've given them all the words, but now let's fill in the blanks. What do you guys actually do? So go ahead, tell us.
Thank you, Lynn. I feel like we will save this podcast or this conversation. Listen to that hype track anytime we need to feel strong about ourselves. As a company, we are on a mission to rewrite the narratives around modern womanhood that run our lives at work, at home, and in our communities. And as we go through our story and the work we do, it's really this framework. Stories that we tell, that we hear, that we tell ourselves, they become the beliefs that we internalize, that we how we see the world. Those beliefs then inform the actions that we go out and do, whether it's we work or we vote or we show up in circles. And ultimately, those create the systems that run our lives. And what we have come to know, when we talk about the name of our company, It All, that often is in reference to you can have it all, women can have it all. But the truth is that for many of us, what became a you can have it all became you must be it all, do it all. And we realized that those common tensions most often were work and family. But really, it was our community systems as well that reinforced so many of those narratives. So in the big scheme of things, we are here to rewrite those narratives through story and conversation like we're having here today.
Nice. So that's what you guys do. And I think we're going to get even more detail as we go on.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a first question because this is front of my mind. The title for this event we decided to say was "The Time Is Now." And so that's how we've been marketing it, how you've been marketing it. Those of you on this webinar are listening to it, that may be what perked your interest. I want to know what you guys see. I see we're on the precipice of a 2024 presidential election. And now we have a female potentially becoming our first female president. I want to say that with some pride. There's some stagnation and declining rates of female founder funding, which you guys experience day in and day out. And we're faced with some frightening loss of human health and reproductive rights. So do you guys want to say anything about why you guys believe we need women in positions of power? Because I have a huge, I would even say it's gone from a belief to maybe even now calcified into a bias. I believe this, and I believe that a lot of these women that need to be in positions of power are women of color. I really have a bias toward that. I feel like they have taken so much in the neck, they've been held down, and they are the people who have steadily just kept saving us from ourselves, and they know how to lead us forward. So what do you guys want to say about the time is now and anything that I just mentioned about your platform?
I think we'll start a little bit with our origin story and why we do the work we do, because that really informs like why this is what we spend the core of our time and energy on. And so I'll let Kacie lead off a little bit about her inception story of how the business came to be.
Yeah, and something I'll start with is the time is now. It can be an individual sentiment for any one of us, and that certainly was how it started for me. It was this my individual story that said like this no longer can be true. But it also can be, just as you alluded to, Lynn, a collective time is now. And oftentimes they are in parallel with each other because we don't live in a vacuum. In 2019, as you mentioned in my intro, I was a senior vice president of strategy. I was with a boutique consulting firm. I was working on incredible work with Fortune 500 and Global 1000s, very sexy work, right? If I were to read that, a younger version of myself, I would have said, wow, that's really incredible. But as I went on in 2019, as I went on maternity leave to have my first daughter, I now have two daughters, which adds another layer of value and importance of the work that we do. But as I went out on maternity leave, I was promoted. And I thought, well, damn, if that isn't having it all, I don't know what is. And as I returned to work, when I talk about a system that is flawed around paid family leave and parental leave, I was in once a month while on maternity leave, still consulting. I had the day I returned from work, had to let 2 team members go. I just things that you think about as a human experience to re-enter the workforce and have that going on, totally unacceptable in, now with the experience and knowledge I have. But in returning to work, I stepped into all my old traditional roles and I hadn't accounted for all the changes that had happened as a person while I had been out giving birth and welcoming this new person into the world. And I say the thing that I found is all the ways that I traditionally had found power and strength, respectability for my peers were often very masculine in nature. I was a head of strategy and sales in tech. That in itself says a lot.
Right? It does.
And I found that all the ways that I had traditionally been strong, I now felt very vulnerable and I felt very almost like a facade. I didn't feel like I was embodying those values. And on the flip side, the ways that I traditionally hadn't maybe felt strong, very feminine in becoming a mother and strong in different ways, I now was finding a lot of strength and purpose and identity in. And it was these tensions for me personally, almost an identity crisis. And I was 6 months into returning from work. I was really grappling with this individually and wanted to drive my car off the road. And I always say that it was never to the point of, I don't want to be here anymore, but it was to the point of, can I hurt myself bad enough that nobody would expect anything else of me anymore?
Wow. So you were on the precipice of something, right?
Exactly.
So, okay, so let's dive into that for just a minute, because I don't think there would ever be a female leader that hasn't maybe gone through some of this transition, because we were programmed and it was more transactional. You lead like a man. All the leadership and consulting books that talked about leadership all had male author,
Yep.
role models, stories, case studies, right?
Mhm.
And so then something flipped, the switch happened, and all of a sudden you were embracing maybe more transformational leadership and leading from the heart and less carrot and stick and more like, how do we nurture and grow people?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So anything else about that you want to talk about as far as, I mean, that's your individual story and it seems like it unlocked something.
That was really the time is now for me. I remember I was driving to pick up my daughter when I had this experience. It was right around the holidays of 2019. So, we're looking at almost 5 years ago now. And I said, well, one, if that little girl thought this was the only experience of having it all, this is how she measures success. Wow, what a failure I am to have not modeled something different. Two, I have options. I have choices. And that's not something that we lovingly call these moments fuck it all moments.
There you go.
Flavors. So
There's
yes.
the bigger title right there.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Because it was whose version of it all. And so this time is now for me was, one, do I want her defining life this way, success this way? Two, I have options. I have a network. I have an education. I have experience. And so many of the people that move into entrepreneurship, I think that often is a calling to say, I don't have to do it this way. And then last piece was, if I'm feeling this way, I can't be the only one. And so that is what sent me on a questioning of saying, okay, well, we got to do something about it. You can sit in this and you can feel the pain, but then what is the place to take it to action? And that was the catalyst for our company. And I can certainly get more into that, but that was what time is now is for me.
Mhm.
All right.
I think to play more on Kacie talking about, so what we call them fuck it all moments. And we have had many iterations of that just in our business, becoming entrepreneurs, going through our own personal journeys. But a tagline that we often say in our business now is like, if you walk away with nothing else, it's trust women, women trust yourselves. And I think often we feel this restless discontent for something more, or like a knowing, an intuition in ourselves as human beings that something is calling to you, whether something is like off in your life or there is like, Lynn, I love how you said you were like, I've got to walk the talk. I'm going to create this book and put it out into the world. And often when we're called to create something or step into a new role or step into our own power, we feel that within ourselves. And that truly feels to me like the moment is now. And it doesn't mean that it's an easy thing to do. So we often call these fuck it all moments. They are when we choose ourself above expectations of society, family, and the hardest one of all is former self. And that is truly like letting go of the expectations or maybe the plan that you had for yourself, because we are ever evolving. And one of the things we learned early in the business is let the moment evolve. Because throughout time, maybe at one point wearing pants in the workplace was revolutionary. And now we're sitting here fighting for a female president.
Right, right. So many things in that message. I wonder if this is the time to filter that down, because I have a question about entrepreneurs. Because again, and Denise, I don't know if you want to share or not, but I know Asia's an entrepreneur, Rosario is an entrepreneur. I imagine that many of us on this call are familiar with the daunting thing that says, and this is one of my pieces of inspiration from Teddy Roosevelt's man in the arena speech that he gave in France. But we're called, and it's a daunting call sometimes overwhelming, and sometimes we welcome it, to step into the arena. And we have a huge arena that just opened up, especially across this country. That moment of, I need to do this. And I'm sure that Denise and Asia, Rosario, you've had those moments where I need to do this. Or you think somebody should go do this, and then you go, wait a minute, maybe it's me that should do this.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know there are examples of that. You guys, I really would like you to talk to that. Can you share, like we have Lizzo in 2022 when she gave her acceptance speech, and she said, I always wanted to see someone like me in the media. You guys have said this. If I could go back and tell little Lizzo something, I'd tell her, girl, it's gonna have to be you. Okay, so talk about the someone in the arena moments. Talk about what you want to say about this.
You can see us taking a big deep breath, because I think we've recently had one of those moments, and we've had them several times throughout our both personal lives and this business. I think that something I can give very tangibly as of late, and please feel free, is we met Lynn when we were, as you mentioned, heading to Sundance. And shortly after Sundance and then South by Southwest in the same year, we had this idea of a documentary, a docuseries that we are making. And as we went on this creative journey to write a script, never did that before in our corporate past lives, but now we're script writers and directors and producers. And so as we went on this, we kept looking outside of ourselves for someone to come in and save the day. And so we kept saying, oh, we can just, maybe there's that one funder that's going to come in and change everything. Maybe we're going to meet this director, and the director's going to know more than we do. And we kept doing that every single time. And that could be true in any business, right? You give this power away thinking that something is going to walk through this door and save you. And finally, we looked at each other. It was earlier this year, this is, several months into this. We both said, like, I think it's us. I don't think anybody's coming. I don't think there's like the hero, like it's us. And are we going to, maybe are we going to get there as fast? No. But are we going to get there in the way that's true to us and that say the message that we need to say? And how do you just stop? I think being in the arena is to realize that you come in with all of these past lived experiences. You don't just today, like the minute we became filmmakers, we didn't say, oh, we did do this. But what we would tell ourselves is we did say, I've never done this before, and now I don't know how. But what do we know how to do? We know how to tell stories. We know how to market. We know how to sell. We know how to translate a message. We know how to visually create a story. And so all of these things that existed in our past lives, they were in our toolkit in the arena. And it was this element of saying, call yourself what you are.
Yeah.
Stop waiting for someone else to come in and be the savior. But if you start acting and you start doing, it's not going to be perfect. But to your point, like nobody else is in the arena. So their commentary this is your personal arena of sorts.
Right.
Yeah. I think truly no one's ever going to care as much as you are. No one's going to carry out your mission the way that you will, with as much passion and ferocity. And I think, again, as Kacie said, call yourself what you are. If you want to be a filmmaker, call yourself a filmmaker. When you introduce yourself to people, if you're an entrepreneur, call yourself an entrepreneur. And you may not know all the vocabulary, but you do have your experience from your former life. And you're bringing all of that to the table. You are probably already sitting at the table when you're having maybe these like feelings of imposter syndrome or whatever as you're stepping into the arena. But one of the things that we realized that's so amazing is when we've stepped into these new spaces, and this happened like for me personally during entrepreneurship as well, like stepping out into that new role, I had zero limiting beliefs on what could be possible because we hadn't been in the industry. So like there was like a negativity or a jadedness that came with so much of this is the way that things are done and this is whatever. And we were skipping steps left and right because we didn't realize that that's how the game is played. And so we kind of wrote our own rules, and it worked to our benefit. There is a ignorance is bliss piece of that. And as some of the limiting beliefs would come into play, it stunted our growth and our progress. And so truly trusting yourself and knowing that you have the tools that you need, but sometimes not knowing the narrative is the best case scenario.
So I'm going to ask the people that are listening to just stop right now and think about how you may have limited yourself in not knowing. But if you look at Katie and Kacie and you realize maybe not knowing is a creative advantage. Maybe I don't get stuck in the vernacular or the way things have to be or have always been. And it sounds like you've adopted this ethos of you can step outside the norm and you guys are okay with stepping outside of the norm and doing it different. I think about Charlotte in Charlotte's Web. She's the leader in the book. She's the main go-to. She's the person in charge. And she did it in her own little way, in one little corner of a barn with her web. You know, it's like that impacted so many lives, and everybody had access to her, and she didn't do leadership in a hierarchical way. So I love that your example is there. I want to ask you a question that may be a little off script. I don't know for you guys. I think you are prepared to answer.
Off script.
Yeah. So there are two things. I know that what I heard underpinning something that you just said is that failure, perceived failure from the outside, things not working out exactly as you thought, could actually be creative fuel. And that there is some vulnerability that was hard, but you were willing to be, and I love this term, professionally vulnerable. You guys want to talk to those two things?
I'm gonna let you lead because Kacie's been doing some writing on this recently.
I've been having like a reckoning with failure, and it's been something that really over the past just few weeks I've been sitting with. And I came from the innovation world, and every innovation or corporate entrepreneurship book is like fail fast, and failure is not failure, it's learning, and yes, but at the core, aren't those euphemisms for a very human experience? Failure is a part of it. Should we be trying? There are two outcomes. Either your expectation is it became true, or your expectation is it did not become true. And I have personally been working with, because I think that how I've coped in the past is to either death grip onto something of like, I'm manifesting it and we're not failing, we're just finding the new way. Or to say, I'm not going to actually put a stake in the ground of something I want because I'm scared if I fail. So this might be setting specific deadlines. This might be going boldly after something. And these aren't overt and known ways that we're doing this. These are subliminal and after a lot of writing and, introspection for months. But it was something that I kept doing as I would realize there were things I wanted. And I would say, I'm just going to trust when they're going to happen. But I actually wasn't taking a strong stance to make them true. And because I was so fearful of how failure feels in my body, the pit in your stomach, the disappointment, all of these things, And I realized just recently, and again, I laughed or posted on LinkedIn, like in a month, I might feel very different, but this is my moment right now where I'm at with failure, is this idea that I put so much story around what failure had to mean that I gave it more power than it needed to.
Hmm.
Failure can just be a thing of an outcome of an expectation we had. And how does something, a singular thing that we're doing, be a failure without equating that we are a failure? And that's something I struggle with a lot. Someone that, my two values, for better or for worse, is authenticity and to be known. The total bummer about to be known is it is outside of ourselves. I can't determine whether anybody else knows me. What I can do is do work I'd be proud to be known for. But so when failure is a part of that, it was so tightly like interwoven to one of my values of how it negatively felt. And I've recently really been saying, great, if it's a failure, then like, isn't it a gift to know what's not going to work?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think we often call it divine redirection, at least for ourselves. And it just feels like every single time that I've quote unquote failed, like throughout my life, we were laughing. Like I saw an Instagram post from someone the other day that was like, every time you break up or get out of a relationship, you get hotter and more successful. And we saw a comedian that said, Kacie was telling me about this. Saw a comedian that said every single time that I like failed on stage or
Yeah.
like had a terrible show, I got 3% funnier. And so it's just like these events that like we're so worried it's going to happen, and yet all the best things in my life have been birthed from absolute and utter failure.
So now we just say, just got hotter and smarter.
Hotter and smarter. Here we go.
Love that. I love that. And I think you wove in the answer to professional vulnerability right there. It's hard. Say it, own it, and you'll get more sexy, smarter, and more successful.
I think also when you practice professional vulnerability, especially in the entrepreneurship circuit, I'll speak to Atlanta because that's where we're at, and that's the offline community we know really well, is that when you live boldly, you invite others to do the same.
Mhm.
When you live vulnerably, you invite others to do the same. When you practice kindness, you see that. And what we found is, especially in the female entrepreneur circle that we existed in, is that everybody appearingly was doing freaking fabulous. Everything was great. Everybody was killing it. Everybody was landing the deals. And Katie and I were really going through our own reckoning earlier this year of like, things are not great right now. We stopped revenue generating things to chase fundraising. That's not coming in. We're not paying ourselves, like real things, not just vanity. Like these are real life things. And we caught up with a fellow entrepreneur who had been in this space of doing really good publicly. And as we sat down, we were on my front porch having coffee. I mean, this woman shared just the realness that was going on behind the scenes of, I've been in the fetal position crying. I've stopped drinking. I'm now in therapy. I'm leaving my entrepreneurship. I'm going back to a full-time job. Things that were very real. And one, how lonely is it to experience those things without community? But two, in sharing that, Katie and I both said like, oh, this is part of the ride. This is an anomaly. This is part of it. And so what we realized as we started to understand that is so often, if we don't have that safe space of community, whether it's groups like this or other circles that we curate, the women that were the entrepreneurs, go back to your point around the funding, they were sharing space with their investors. And there is a misalignment of safe space when you have the people who, when you say, I'm having a bad day, they say, well, maybe you're not worthy of being invested in. Versus, I'm having a bad day. Oh, yeah, that's part of the experience. Keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I want to segue to a question about It All Media's Stories to Systems framework, which it states that stories inform our beliefs, which I believe, beliefs inform our actions, and actions create the systems that run our lives at home, at work, and our communities. So what's the story that you've been told, either by yourself or others, that's had to be rewritten to get you where you guys are today? Or maybe the story that you're currently rewriting? Tell us about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. One of my limiting beliefs that I still grapple with on a regular basis is, we'll just say I'm addicted to struggle.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah. I I believe that it has to be hard in order to be successful. I believe often that like it's hard to make money. There has to be a struggle there if you're actually gonna like do well and be rich. And I believe that like if I'm not like working myself to death, then I'm not like we'll never make it. I won't be able to get it over the line. And I've realized many times in my life that I hide in the doing, instead of actually focusing on maybe that more 80-20 doing less and actually moving yourself miles instead of inches. And I think there's so much of it doesn't actually have to be this hard. You can live in the present. You can we've brought so much joy and hope into like our ethos and business. And that needs to be a part of my day to day. And as soon as that's a piece of it, my vibration seems to like elevate and everything comes to me easier. I feel like through struggle, I repel. And yet I want it to be so close to me always.
But think of how good it feels when you can say that was hard and I overcame it, right? These are stories we tell ourselves and we internalize. And there are times in life where it is hard and we made it through. But to self-fulfill that or put it out there. And we all know as entrepreneurs, there's plenty of ways to make it hard on ourselves.
Yeah. And I think it's been a pride point most of my life. So I grew up in a very impoverished community in Appalachia and I grew up on a farm. And I think a lot of the values there were like, you come from nothing and you make yourself into something. And these rags to riches stories are all over the media. The hard work that ultimately resulted in something, worth being known for. And so that's kind of the thing that I've always bought into. And also as part of Western culture, we are obsessed with how hard we work. Like we literally brag about like, oh my God, I had to stay late last night. Is that great? Like you missed out on all this other stuff. Like, why are we applauding that? But we are. So I think that there's, a piece of all of it that just like plays into my mind and I have to work very hard to combat that.
And I'm glad you are. I mean, I've dedicated an entire chapter in my book to that because like you just said, Katie, we are like 95% of our beliefs are wired by the time we're 8. And a lot of us don't go back and question, does it belong to me or not? And you're starting to see where they are. You name them, you label them as limiting. And you said this thing, she may not rest in peace, the death of limiting beliefs. You want to talk to that?
Sure. Actually, well, after I'll let Kacie share her limiting belief, but we can share, and if you distribute this out, Lynn, to your community, we'll share. We have an exercise that we do as part of our mastermind, which is like one of our coaching offerings. And we say, may she not rest in peace. It's the death of old beliefs. Or limiting beliefs. And it's just an exercise that helps us kind of bury those, even though they may still come back and haunt us. We know that they are dead.
Yeah, there we go. We know that they are dead. We just see ghosts or hear them.
Yep. We have one of these days, a vision of a very cool experience where everybody comes in like very dramatic funeral garb with like, the veils, and we all are doing like a burning ceremony of our limiting. So like that is, the vision of how much we really buy into.
Kacie, of course, planned the dress code.
Yeah, exactly.
And the ritual of it, that's so cathartic.
It is. And I think sometimes creating the ceremony about that, I mean, we laugh about it, but truly creating the ceremony of actually experiencing that becomes a story we now have embodied. That is no longer mine. I put that to rest. And so it does, yes, like some of the woo things that we do, they can seem silly or, oh, that's, but truly there's so much power in that. And if we take the time to do it, it can be inconsequential. It's so powerful.
It is so powerful. Thank you. I have another question. And I think you have this love. I have this love. Some of you on the call may have this, where we love entrepreneurs. We love entrepreneurship and storytelling. For those of us who have a storytelling gift, or we just like to tell stories, we recognize a problem and we see problems. So some of you have a superpower to see problems. You just can say that is a concern. This is a problem. This needs to change. But you're not getting stuck in admiring the problem. You are drawn to, what do we do about it? How do we describe it? How do we solve it? How do we study it? How do we discuss it? How do we do something about it? So as entrepreneurs, I know you guys are problem solvers, and I'm wondering, what do you want to share with the audience about being problem solvers rather than admiring a problem or getting caught in the victim mode of a problem?
I think that for going back to the time is now, the idea of being in the arena, all of these are pulling at a very similar thread. And the sense is it's one thing to admire it, but to get close to it and actually say, how am I going to dance with this problem, for lack of better words? We look at it as, what are our superpowers that allow us to come at this problem in a way, going back to Katie's point, that is easy? Because the things that come, we all know this in practice, but the things that come to us so easily and joyfully, and that many of us do in our sleep or in our free time or for free, those are the things where the real magic exists. And so I think for when we look at doing something about it, there can be something that happens when you look so big and say, oh my God, this is so big. How do I do something? There's no way anybody could. And you make the problem so big that there's no way to start.
Okay.
And that, I think, especially, I mean, we're in the world of women's storytelling. This very much intersects with policy. This intersects with activism. This intersects with very big, nuanced topics that could feel very hopeless. And I think many of us have experienced that over the past several years at a macro scale, that there can be a feeling of hopelessness. And for us, we said, one, that's not a place we want to stay. I think for both of us, anger is not a place we can stay in for long. We can visit her now and then, but it's not a sustainable place for us. And hopelessness as well. And so I think each of us has our own experience of our own catalyst of when no longer we want to just sit on the sidelines. And so when we think about not talking, earlier this year, when we were pitching our series, we talked about it a lot, talked about it for about 9 months. And we finally looked at each other and said, we're done talking about it. It may not be the way we thought we were going to do it, but we're ready to do something about it.
Nice.
We don't want to just sit here, because then don't you get further from the problem? And the more you get further from the problem perspective, think about it, it gets bigger, it gets bigger, it gets bigger. And so when we look at this, I think it's one, where can we come in that's really organic and easy? And I'll give it a very tangible example. When you look at the work we're doing around women's narratives, there are people who activate and organize at the largest scales. They are doing lobbyists, they are doing political research, they are supporting massive organization. What we have found, we have total reverence for the people who do that. But our superpower is making the individuals that we work with and that we talk with feel so secure, seen, validated, and in their own power that they trust themselves enough to show up into whatever space they are.
Wow.
So we are not people to solve for the collective. We can understand it, we can look at it, but we are not actually those people. And we spent a lot of time trying to be those people. And when we found ourselves keep talking about it, but not really knowing where to start, was when we realized we needed to go back to what was our superpower. We could approach it at a different way. Still the same outcome, but our approach leaned into what we're naturally gifted at.
So let's crystallize this. What is the superpower? And then what is the thing that you focus on?
For ours, well, storytelling is a piece of it, but we focus on individual stories. So we want to hear from the individuals and help them not just tell their story to others, but tell their story to themselves, which makes them feel like in their own power. And we believe that when an individual feels most in their power, they will help the collective rise. We have a framework that we often use in a lot of our coaching, and that is define, create, own. And we believe that first you have to define what it is that you want and go inward, then outward to create that, And then onward, which is owning it. And when you own your power, you bring others with you.
Nice.
And for us, that's like always been our sweet spot, is focusing in on individuals. Like Kacie said, early days when we started this business, if we could just be professional hype women for others, that would be like the joy of my life. And when we think about that, that is like, and we're great at spinning a narrative. And it's like, if we can give the women not just a narrative or a story that sounds good to them, that they feel like, damn, I did all of those things, because we can tell them back something that they might put a very humble spin on. But it's also their like vocabulary, what they use. I think in the world we live in, it's very challenging sometimes to explain our experiences.
Yeah.
And through so much of the work Kacie and I have done, we've learned that some of these stories we tell ourselves are millennia old. And I think that is like the giant aha, is this isn't like our mother told us this story or our grandmother heard this story. No, this is like before the patriarchy. Like this is like back in Mesopotamia, like these were happening. And so I think some of that is the stories are so ingrained in our culture that they show up in places that we don't realize. And the more knowledge and awareness we have of why we believe what we believe, the more we're able to describe our experiences and apply a new vocabulary to explain it not only to others, but to ourselves. And it's a very empowering thing to be able to do. And so ours has been going out and listening to individual stories and collecting and curating and learning from all these brilliant people in the world, and taking that and putting it into something that's very tangible and understandable and sending it back out.
Nice. We're going to start to taper down a little bit today. And so be thinking about points that you haven't made that you want to. The last thing I want to ask you guys is this thing about authenticity plus agency equals hope. Would you guys like to talk to that? That's something I think our audience would enjoy.
Yeah.
Sure.
There's a woman, Amanda Hirsch. She writes a newsletter called Mighty Forces. She's someone that we've come to know and really love her work. And this is something she shared, I guess maybe a couple months ago now. But this idea that when you use your authentic voice and use it in the way that you want, use it with your own agency, that's where hope is born. And that became so much of our work. We say at every turn is to infuse joy and hope. Because when you start from a place of joyfulness and a place of hope, things seem more possible. And when you're doing the work that we do, which a lot of times is very heavy, you need that, because what we see is so often, especially in the impact space and entrepreneurship space, is that we don't have good practices of sustainability.
Yeah.
We show up really bright and then we retreat and go completely dark. Or we are short-lived because we expend all of our energy, all of our resource. And so I think, going back to something you mentioned earlier, I think that is a story that we're rewriting. Not only, for ourselves individually, how we're showing up, but how do we, recognizing that any of these things we're working on, entrepreneurship, social impact, storytelling, culture change, these are long-term games. And we have to figure out how to be in the race for a long time, not to overuse sports analogies, but to be present in a way that we can actually continue to show up. And so for us, that's where our authentic voice is, hey, trust yourself. Trust yourself when it's too much, when you need to rest, when you think something is right. And doing that in your own way is what is going to heal this world.
Nice.
Often I feel like our world says, if you can't do everything, do nothing.
And you guys say what?
Yeah. And ours is, we're just going to start the conversation.
Okay. We're going to do something. We're just going to start the conversation. So you go to discovery instead of having to know, what are the outcomes? What is the solution? What is the strategy?
Absolutely. And I think there's two things that happen there. One, asking great questions often leads to much better solutions. But two, it's not only yours to solve. And I think that's a fallacy of entrepreneurship, that we have to exist and do everything ourselves. But there's a reason that we all have different gifts that align along the same spectrum of solving a problem, is that there's partnerships, collaborations. And that's something that we're actively realizing ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think today's a good example of that, because we're both in the coaching arena and the consulting arena.
Absolutely.
And yet what I do fulfills a niche of restoring the lost self, and what you guys do is restoring the authenticity of the lost voice. And we can live in the same space and talk to the same people, and there doesn't have to be any competition. It's just, let's have a conversation, and what are you doing and what are we doing? And sometimes it goes together, and sometimes we just cheer for each other on the other side.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Professional hype women.
Yes. So what have we not talked about as we wind down that you feel like needs to be said? Is there anything? Because I know you guys have an ask or a gift or something for our group. There's, they're not just here. There's something you're going to challenge them or invite them to do. But before we get there, anything you feel like we've missed that we need to talk about?
I feel, first of all, thank you
Yeah,
for today, because
absolutely.
I think we've covered such a wide spectrum. And I think that maybe not to of something missed, but that I want to reiterate of your Charlotte's Web analogy. Whatever corner of the universe you occupy, and just within your own arm's reach, right? I'm not saying you have to run and do it, but within your own arm's reach, if you heal that, you show the person next to you that they can heal that, and the person next to them, that is enough. If that is all you do in this life, that is enough. And I think that is the essence of our business. And we happen to love working with women because there's so much there around stories we've been told. And to your point, the fact that we're, talking about a first woman president, and, damn it, not the last. And yeah, I go back to that, and the power, realizing that our power lies within just our own realm of influence, and doing that is no small feat. And to continue to show up each day is the boldest act of activism there is.
Well said. Katie, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think she just dropped the mic. So
She did. Mic drop. Yeah. So what would you ask? Like, if people want to know more about you, they want to engage, what's next step?
There's a couple of things that we're going to ask you to do. The simplest and easiest is to head over to our Substack. Think of it as the hub, the hand to hold, the playbook for, again, our lovingly coined fuck it all moments. It is itall.substack.com. Very simple. There are paid versions, and if you like our work and want to support it, we of course invite you to do so, but there are also free versions available.
Subscribe, follow us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
No, that's a good start. What's next?
Yes, happy to put that in the chat.
Yeah, let's do that. And then also, those of you who are listening, this recording probably won't come out until the 1st of next week, because Shannon D, who runs all of that part of the company, is in Disneyland with her son, who loves Disneyland today.
So fun.
She took time away to be with her son. So we're letting her have that professional time away. And next week, this recording will come out. So those of you who are looking for it, will be a little bit delayed, but it will be coming.
Awesome.
And I would say, if anybody on how to work with us, if you're an individual, I would say it is someone that is feeling that restless discontent for something more. We say we're for the women with a restless discontent for something more and a bias to create it. And so you're at a point where maybe something doesn't feel right. You don't know what it is, or maybe you do know what it is and you don't know what the path forward looks like. We work with women both individually and in cohorts for that. The second piece is, if your organization, and this could be everything from an actual business to a nonprofit or a cause, we are in the business of what we say helping the helpers. This is finding how to make sure individuals can sustainably show up and do the work. And that might be around how to better tell the story publicly, how to tell your own story to yourself. And so all of that is captured on the Substack as well. But we invite the chance to do that. And that's some of the most meaningful work we do.
Beautiful. Well, those will all be in links with this recording when it comes out. You can go to the chat right now and find some links. Katie and Kacie, thank you for being with us today. I so appreciate what you're doing. And you can see Asia loves this.
Thank you, Asia.
So many words of wisdom. I think this has been the chicken soup for the female soul today on some levels. So
I can't believe you just said that, Lynn. I want to write a book that's like fuck it all, but it's like I literally wrote chicken soup
This is
for the soul.
putting it in the universe. You hear that?
FIA story.
Yep. Yep, Jack Canfield didn't write all the chicken soup books that need to be written, so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. Those of you who are here live, thank you for joining us, and those who are listening, know that if you want to be part of this, let us know. You can go to info@soulsalt.com and know how to sign up. If you haven't already, for our Courageous Growth webinars, you get to see beautiful, fantastic, inspiring, and entrepreneurial spirits come on and speak to our hearts. So thank you for today. We so appreciate it, and best wishes with everything.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much. Appreciate you all.
Yeah, appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Bye.